For centuries, sleeping in the cold wasn't the exception, it was the rule. In times of war, harsh winters, and scarcity of firewood or fuel, nighttime warmth depended not on luxury, but on practical ingenuity. When stoves went out and walls froze, survival lay in the method. Simple, silent, and almost forgotten systems transformed the bed into a thermal barrier, designed more for insulation than for comfort. This isn't a romantic tale or a myth. One of those real solutions that kept soldiers and entire families alive when the environment was hostile and every degree of warmth made a difference. For centuries, people understood something that almost no one considers today. Cold doesn't steal your heat from above, it steals it from below and outwards. That's why, in old houses and places without heating, the priority wasn't blankets, but the bed itself. Beds were raised off the ground with stone, wood, or simple structures, leaving an airspace underneath that acted as a natural insulator. Only that detail alone greatly reduced heat loss, much more than adding blankets on top. The goal wasn't soft comfort, but density. Mattresses of straw, compressed wool, or thick layers of fabric were used, their purpose being to trap air, not to look elegant. But the real secret was hidden, an insulating layer placed directly beneath the sheet. Blankets of wool, felt, or folded fabric absorbed body heat and prevented it from seeping to the colder area below. It wasn't luxury, it was survival, and it worked. In fact, this technique appears repeatedly in military and rural accounts. Soldiers slept on top of their own coats, spread out, because they knew it provided warmth. Difference. And the most interesting thing is that it still works today. If you place a thick wool or cotton blanket under your sheet, you'll notice the change immediately in a cold room. Heat is retained better because it's not about weight, but about sealing in warm air where it really matters. For centuries, people didn't combat the cold by piling up blankets haphazardly, but by using simple, intelligent logic. First came a light layer, then denser materials like wool, and finally an outer layer that trapped heat. It wasn't about quantity, it was about order. Each layer served a specific function, creating a thermal barrier that kept the body warm with very few resources. Another key detail was the ceiling. Old-fashioned beds weren't left open. The sides and bottom were fitted tightly so that warm air wouldn't escape during the night. Even posture mattered. Sleeping with your head slightly elevated and your shoulders protected helped prevent cold air from entering through your chest when you breathe, something that almost no one considers today, and which makes a huge difference. The interesting thing is that this method still works today. Instead of piling more blankets on top, try folding an extra one only on the bottom third of the bed. If you can, insulate the underside of the mattress as well, and prioritize wool or dense natural fibers. Sealing the sides and foot of the mattress is much more effective than haphazardly piling layers. This logic has been used for centuries in rural homes, camps, and extreme situations because it conserves heat with minimal effort, and it remains just as valid now. And here's the most curious thing of all. Many of these techniques disappeared not because they stopped working, but because cheap heat made us careless. When modern heating arrived, we stopped thinking about insulation and started relying on a switch on the wall. But it only takes a power outage or a gas failure for the body to remember a basic truth: heat is built in, not bought. That's why these ancient methods continue to surprise us today, because they don't require technology. Just understanding how cold moves and how heat is trapped. It's not nostalgia or extreme survival, it's pure efficiency. And when you try just one of these adjustments on a freezing night, you realize something uncomfortable but true. For centuries, people didn't sleep better by having less, they slept better because they knew exactly what to do. And the most striking thing is that this knowledge was never hidden. It simply stopped being passed down. It was passed from grandparents to parents, from soldiers to farmers, until a generation stopped needing it, or so they thought. Today we live surrounded by technology, but we still wake up cold without knowing why. And the answer isn't in buying a more expensive blanket, but in recovering that forgotten logic. Insulate before you bundle up, seal before you pile up. When you understand this, the bed ceases to be a passive place and becomes a shelter designed with intention. And that's the twist that hooks you. You're not copying an old trick. You're using a strategy that kept millions of people alive when there were no second chances. And this is where everything changes, because once you understand this logic, you can no longer unravel it. You begin to notice how the cold seeps in around the edges, how the heat escapes underneath, how a poorly insulated bed steals your energy while you sleep. Suddenly, these old tricks stop seeming like curiosities and feel like real hacks, almost illegal because of how simple they are. The unsettling thing is that no one teaches them to you because they don't generate consumption or sales, only well-being. And when you sleep soundly that first night, without waking up shivering, you understand why for centuries they didn't depend on modern comforts, they depended on knowledge. And that knowledge, when you recover it, remains just as powerful today. And if you stop to think about it, all of this has an almost unsettling logic. The human body doesn't need perfect temperatures. It needs stability. When heat is well retained, rest becomes deeper, breathing calms, and the body enters that state where it truly recovers. That's why, in the past, sleeping wasn't just closing your eyes, it was preparing the ground, like a shelter before a storm. Every blanket, every fold, every sealed space had a clear purpose. I don't know, it wasn't about luxury or aesthetics, but about creating a microclimate that would protect the body during hours of total vulnerability. And here's the detail that almost no one expects. Many people who say today, "I sleep badly," are actually sleeping cold without realizing it. It's not extreme cold, it's a constant theft of heat that forces you to move, to wake up, to not get complete rest. When you apply these ancient techniques, the change isn't just thermal, it's mental. You wake up with more energy, less tension, and a strange feeling of deep rest. And that's what makes this topic so powerful for today. We're not talking about the past or extreme survival. We're talking about sleeping better tonight, using rules that time has already tested and that have never failed. And the most ironic thing of all is that while we look for increasingly complex solutions to sleep better, the answer has always been right under our noses. Not in a gadget, not in a smart blanket, but in how we use what we already have. When you understand this, sleep stops being a fight against the cold and becomes a conscious, almost strategic act. And there it is. The final hook. The next time you go to bed on a cold night, you're not going to think about turning up the heat. You're going to think like they did centuries ago. Those who knew that a good night's sleep could mean the difference between surviving or